Hi, and welcome to today's top story. Something that's been a contentious issue, I think, is fair to say, for 30 years in Sault Ste. Marie. Looks like might be on the verge of changing. To help us understand a little bit more about that, Matthew Shoemaker, who is the councillor for Ward 3. Good to see you, Matthew. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. The Competitiveness Act has been restored. So explain what the Competitiveness Act is.
So it's a provincial government legislation, and it changes a whole bunch of laws. And there are changes in there that range from environmental protections to labor protections to, so, you know, there's a big span of changes, but the one that is of importance, I think, to the city, and the one that the city has lended its support to, just a specific provision, because we don't necessarily, we haven't necessarily communicated on the whole bill, just one provision of it, is that the provincial government is going to change the Labour Relations Act to open up bidding on municipal projects so that anybody can bid, because for the last 30 years it has been restricted to only 2 unions being able to bid on Sault Ste. Marie projects, and that has excluded all other unions and all non-unionized companies from bidding on city work.
It's excluded other unions as well.
Yes.
So which 2 unions were allowed?
So the Laborers Union and the Carpenters Union have been the 2 that have been allowed, but it has excluded anybody who is not those 2 unions from being the general contractors.
So how does that work? How does the city need to take 30 years to finally get somebody to listen?
Yeah,
I mean, I know it's not just Sault Ste. Marie, it's not just the construction issue, but like you guys have been at this for a long time.
We have. We've tried court challenges. We've tried to challenge, we've tried to lobby to change the legislation. And there were NDP government in power in the early 90s. There was a Conservative government in power in the mid 90s, and there's been a Liberal government in power for last 15 years, and none of them have changed it. So we're happy to see that this new government has finally taken the reins on this issue, listened to municipalities, including Sault Ste. Marie, Kitchener-Waterloo, Hamilton, and Toronto, and changed the law, we think, for the better.
Well, I imagine, too, that the issue in Toronto, because there's always construction there, obviously, because it's the biggest city, it must have been a thorn in their side.
So there have been think tanks that have done studies on this issue, and they say that the price increase by restricting the bidding can be anywhere from 3 to 30%. So Sault Ste. Marie's got a West End sewage treatment plant project coming up, $40 million upgrade. So, on the low range, we're looking at over $1 million in savings if it's 3% savings. So in Toronto, it would be amplified by hundreds of millions or potentially even billions.
Now, technically, the municipalities were actually called construction employers. How on earth, that's so, as a complete total layperson, does not make any sense to me.
Yeah, we were treated as if we were a construction company instead of a public sector entity, and school boards were captured by this too. So what the new legislation is doing is making it very clear that municipalities are not construction employers and cannot be deemed to be construction employers by the Labour Relations Board, which is how we got into all this mess in the first place. So it changes the legislation so that so that there's no discretion for a judge or a tribunal member to say, yeah, you did. You accepted payment for changing a shelf in social service or in social housing, so therefore you're a construction employer. The provincial government has made clear that that will not be the case anymore.
Well, it only makes sense, right?
Absolutely, and this is the fight we've been having for 31 years, since 1987. That it was nonsensical to treat us the same as you're going to treat, Ellis Don, or as you're going to treat Saldan, because we are not a construction company. We may do the odd construction job for social housing. We may do it for, as a in-kind gift for, the John Howard Society or the Soup Kitchen, but we do not do construction work as part of our...
Well, it's not like you're doing the drafts and
right.
The budgets, like you're not experts on construction.
Right. But what it has done is restricted who we can have bid on our projects. So for the last 30 years, if we need, for example, we're redoing the siding on City Hall, we could only accept bids from those who were tied to one of those two unions or both of the unions. So we ended up picking CIRO, which is tied to the Carpenters Union, I believe, but they had an agreement that they would subcontract to the Laborers Union for any labor work. So, you know, it's been a cumbersome system for 30 plus years.
So at this point, is status quo? Can you, right in the middle of a project like the City Hall one, can you rebid or ask for bids again and start the job not over, but have more input from other construction facilities?
Not on a job that's already underway, like City Hall. And the law hasn't passed yet. Of course, it's a majority government, so the
Right.
presumption is that it will pass, but you know, the government has, or can, I suppose, change its mind if it so chooses. So we're sure that there will be hard lobbying efforts to change their mind on this, but we are hopeful, and we have lended support to this piece of legislation, this provision in this legislation, so that they know the City of Sault Ste. Marie is behind them in this regard. But for future projects, we haven't started the West End sewage treatment upgrade yet. So we can look to perhaps defer it 6 months or defer it 12 months so that we are not captured by this and we could get the best possible bid.
Now, with regards to the renovations at City Hall, there was a protest there, and it related to this, right?
Yeah, it was all about the carpenters or the laborers claiming that the laborers or the carpenters were doing work that the others should have been doing. So that would, you know, if we weren't in this system, we wouldn't have that type of protest going on, that sort of picket line going on at City Hall. So it'll solve a lot of the headaches that the city has had to endure for 30 plus years because of bad provincial legislation.
I think it's interesting because I'm sure that a lot of people don't understand the details and the financial ramifications for a city like Sault Ste. Marie and municipality.
It's a complex and sort of detailed legal provision in the Labor Relations Act that, but you know, it's best to use a comparison. If you were looking to have a house built, would you say that I'm only going to have Company A and Company B bid on it when there's 50 companies out there that you could have bid on it? And then tell Company A and B that they're the only ones that are going to bid on it. You wouldn't get the best possible quote you could from Company A and B if that were the case. So it's akin to when you go out to look for the best price, you want to make sure you're getting good quality. You want to make sure you're getting the best price, and that's we control the quality through our selection process of ensuring materials, safety record, that they have all the required checks from WSIB and things of that nature. And now we want to make sure that we've got the best bid in terms of cost efficiency.
And you know, and reacting to this latest development, you wrote something that really struck me, how some businesses are paying the taxes, but they have not historically been able to bid on these jobs.
Yeah, so you get a company like, for example, you know, there's lots of them out there.
Sure.
So there's Wright Construction, there's Ruscio Construction,
Yeah.
there's you know, there's any number of them that
Like
are
local
not
construction
local
companies,
construction
right.
companies that are not bound by the Carpenters Union or by the Laborers Union. They may be bound by unions. For example, CLAC is
Right.
is a union that represents a number of companies in town. They can't bid on they can't be the general contractor on city work. So they're paying for the renovations to City Hall, for example, and we're required to go with a company from Timmins because they are bound by the right union. So it's you always want to get the best price, for sure.
Absolutely.
But you also want to make sure that you're opening up the process so that you can get the best price, so that you can be assured you're getting the best price.
You know what, I think it's interesting. I bet you guys, over the last 30 years as councillors, as mayors, as staff, have heard some complaints on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been the council in '97 brought a legal challenge of well, the council in '87, I should say, fought the efforts of the unions to tie us into this system, lost. The council in '97 brought a challenge to it. The council in 2001 brought a challenge to it, and are or were in the process of challenging it once again with the hopes that new court decisions that have come out since 2001 would help us get out of the system. But thankfully, without having to go through all that effort, the provincial government has recognized this problem and has said they're going to change the law.
So with regards to municipalities enjoying a more financial benefit, is it as obvious as picking the lowest bid?
No, not necessarily. So you want to still make sure that they've got the best quality. So you want to make sure that their safety records are great. You want to make sure that all their standards are up to snuff. And we do that in the municipality by inviting bidders or by pre-approving bidders who meet all the standards that the municipality requires. So it's not that we're just going to go with the cheapest labor that we can find. And that has always been one of the points that the carpenters and laborers have come at us as a municipality with. They've said, well, you're just going to go to the lowest bidder. Not the case. We want to open up the bidding to all shops, unionized and non-unionized. And it's a bit cheeky for the carpenters or the laborers to say, well, CLAC has unskilled laborers, because they are unionized.
Well, of course they're going to say that.
Of course,
right?
Because they're trying to protect the system that they currently operate in. But it is an inherently unfair system, and it needs to be changed, in my opinion, and we're glad to see that steps are being taken, hopefully, to change it.
Now, steps being taken, I think, is probably something that we should talk about, too. When can this possibly happen? When's the earliest?
So the provincial government is in recess. They're back today and yesterday to end a power strike that risked putting lights out for many people over the holidays. But the provincial government's in recess until early February. It'll probably take 2 months after that to debate the bill, to go to committee, to argue whether or not there should be changes to this provision or that provision. We hope that at the end of that process, the provision that changes the Labor Relations Act is still in there, and then presuming the government still supports it, which the expectation is that they would, it would pass in late May, early April, and we'd be in a renewed open tendering system as a municipality. So.
Keeping our fingers crossed for the spring.
Keeping our fingers crossed.
Matthew, thank you so much for clearing this up. I really appreciate your perspective on it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take this break. We'll be right back on Top Story.